Hello, everyone. Welcome to the r/Kollywood podcast. This is our 26th episode today, and we've successfully completed 25 episodes in our channel. There are about 160 subscribers. Thank you so much to everyone who stayed subscribed to our channel, who have given us feedback, and who has kept us growing. If you're listening to today's episode and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. In today's episode, we will be covering a new series called Under the Lens. In Under the Lens, we'll take one movie and look at that for an entire episode. We cover the movie's strengths, weaknesses, and what we think are potentials that could have been better. Keeping things topical, we're going to look at Thug Life that just released recently. So, if you would like to hear any of our extended thoughts on the film itself and how we all felt about it, you can listen to episode number 24, which was Thug Life FDFS page. So, yeah, let's get started. I'm joined by Hari.
Hi, bro. Yeah, good to be here. Yeah, let's get started and talk about this absolute shambles of a film.
Hello, Dark. Welcome again.
Yeah, hey pirate. Yeah, I mean it's been a week since I saw the movie, and I've been kind of. It's been more than a week, honestly, and I've been in a limbo. I hope this after this episode, I can let go of Thug Life finally.
Awesome. And hello, Siege. Welcome again.
Thanks, Pirate. And guys, now on Solra, okay, maybe the film did live up to expectations, but hey, we have enough content to, to create an episode today, just purely from a writing standpoint. So, and it's always a great opportunity to hang out with you guys. So at least in that sense, I'm actually thankful to Thug Life. So there you are.
That's a nice way to look at it.
We'll probably get into maybe one of our first segments for today. So whenever like a film comes out, especially like its teaser and trailer, with or without our own control, we all have our own film that we run in our heads. When we see the scenes, when we see the music, everything unfold, நமக்குள்ளே ஒரு story ஒன்று உருவாகும். So அந்த மாதிரி, let's just go through the group and let's find out, did you guys have a sense of a story and how different was that from how it played out?
So I'm going to add one extra thing to what you said, Pirate. Along with the teaser and trailer, right, I'm also going to add the element of what I thought the story could be based on the interviews that we heard from Kamal, Mani, and the broader crew. Okay, so to me, first off, before the actual teaser dropped, I thought this is going to be some gangster film. Okay, fine. So I'll anchor it. The trailer was the first time, and the teaser one they didn't give out much away. It just had visual callbacks to their previous collaboration to Nayagan, and it was more technically focused, if that makes sense. It's really focusing on the visuals and the music and so on. The trailer is where we first got a hint of the story. Now, எனக்கு வந்து the trailer பார்த்தப்போ I thought, okay, fine. So, a gangster story. Kamal is a gangster who kind of adopts or raises Simbu's character in some shape or form. Simbu one day he turns on Kamal, and then Kamal goes out and takes revenge. This is what you get from the trailer. And I think கிட்டத்தட்ட வந்து படத்துல அது கதை தான் இருக்கு. Let's be very honest. There's nothing which is too drastically different from it. But what I think intrigued me about this film was what Kamal and Mani said in multiple interviews, where they said that movies like Thug Life will point out the futility of violence. There have been a lot of films that have glorified violence. They've used it for mass moments and elevation, but Thug Life will use the same sort of setup to show the futility of it. So I thought, okay, fine, maybe they will hit these plot beats, but in a way there will be a character arc or journey for our key protagonists, which will in essence talk about this element that they've been banding about, right? Watching the film, I can sense that that is what they were trying to do. It's just that I think the execution was all over the place.
For some reason, I never I never from the interviews I never got that, and also I never felt the movie even dealt with something like that. So this is
Yeah, bro,
entirely
he
new for me.
explicitly
This is totally new for me. Yeah.
Kamal explicitly says this. I want to quote in the interview தெரியுமா, the Anupama Chopra one with Hollywood Reporter.
Yeah.
He explicitly says this. If you search on YouTube, right, there's literally a thumbnail where it says Thug Life will talk about the futility of violence.
Yeah, I
And that's
started
what actually
skipping.
intrigued me more than the trailer.
So from my end, right? Like I won't lie. Like just before this pod, just like a revision, I திருப்பி போய் trailer போய் நான் already பார்த்தேன். And I still felt it was a really good trailer cut, and I was getting like goosebumps when STR was going inimil nada ingirangarai saktivel and all that, you know. And Kamal follows it with இது எனக்கும் எவனுக்கும் நடக்கும் போர். See, the trailer worked out for me big time. No denying. Like I'll actually blame the subreddit for this theory, but somewhere I started believing that Trisha was somebody who was plotted by STR to get back on Kamal, which is something which has happened in a few other Tamil movies recently. And I'm kind of glad I was wrong about that. But somewhere down, right, in the trailer, there's a scene where Nasser is talking to Simbu and he mentions that எல்லாமே இனிமே அமரன் தான் பார்த்துக்குவானா நாங்களாம் எதுக்கு, like after Kamal when he's going to the jail he says அமர் தான் பார்த்துக்குவாங்களா. So I started believing if Nasser is telling that directly to Simbu, I started thinking maybe there are two Simbus involved, and I'm again glad I was wrong about that. The one thing that I kept praying that shouldn't happen after what I saw the trailer was STR and Kamal tag teaming, like it was Jilla or something, and beating down a common enemy in the climax. I don't know. I mean, Ali Faisal was the reason Thug Life ended up being a bad movie for me. The character just being too convenient, and but yeah, I mean, the trailer was pretty straightforward about STR and Kamal kind of going to be going on loggerheads against each other. And from the trailer, I was just curious why. Like, why are they going to be against each other? It has to have a significant reason, right?
Yeah, I think that you made a really good point. I think the reason why they go against each other was the more captivating thing for me as well out of that trailer cut. I think the main thing I got from the trailer cut was that this is somewhere in between all this gangster mess. There's gonna be, a really nice father and son kind of relationship kind of story, and I was just really intrigued on to see how or what makes them go against each other. And yeah, unfortunately, that got all messed up. But yeah.
I think for me, when I saw the teaser, it was like definitely like, I mean, or at least the first look, right? That's the one where Kamal just stands in the middle of like a desert, and he's just, that felt like too like photo shootish. So I really didn't have any expectations at that point, because I know like they were just sort of teasing the look and the sort of general tone of the film. Um, and then I think, like Siege mentioned, I think the thing that I was kind of intrigued by was the title of the film, because for a long time, like, of course, there have been like memes that we use Thug Life for. Like, for example, whenever a politician says something, or whenever someone gives a nose cut to someone else in a video, usually the Thug Life basically comes on, and then there's just glasses put on top of the person. That's how Thug Life is usually incorporated in context, right? So I was curious, is it being used in that meme context, or is there actually like,
Pirate,
is there?
it lived up to its
Yeah,
name, right? It lived up to the meme.
it kind of, because I was actually curious about why they chose that specific name, and then I remember Kamal actually saying he chose because like he was actually inspired from it from Tupac. And like that goes to Siege's point from earlier. So just about how the glorification of violence was actually something that they said that they were going to explore the consequences of it and things like that. The word thug life actually itself from Tupac goes into a lot more about like how like marginalized communities are often like tarred with that, and what sort of repercussions causes things there. So when Kamal said he was actually inspired from that, like Siege said, I thought, okay, so there is the aspect of a gangster's life, but then we're probably going to get more to it than that. But yeah, I think awesome. So I'm glad we all kind of went through what we thought about the film. Okay, so now I think what we can do is let's dive into the actual movie itself. So first, I think what I want to focus on are the, let's say, positives. What are things that if we were given an option to look at rewriting this film, what are things that we would keep in the story?
See, the idea and the screenplay, how it was paved, I was kind of okay with it. Like, I was totally invested in the story of a king. That's how I saw Shaktivel. and he's someone who loves his life, and he loves to be alive. In some sense, he is supposed to be the Amar character, and he was against an adopted prince who doesn't carry the bloodline of the king of Velu. I'm still not 100% sure if Amar was behind the crown that Velu was holding all these times. But we also got glimpses of the bruises that he was carrying when he was a child. But somewhere I was a little confused if he did see Shaktivel as a guardian, as a godfather, as the Nayagan for him. From the writing point of view, with the story, I was pretty excited about everything that led to when Amar was holding Shaktivel's neck in the interval block class. So அது வரைக்கும் I was kind of excited only. Like நான் interval blockல வெளில வரும்போது I was kind of pretty happy about how the first half turned out. I was seeing like two big hits clash against each other, and it kind of translated pretty okay for me on the screen. Actually pretty goodness also. Like there were reasons which were not satisfying enough, but how it turned out in a cinematic view, I was kind of okay with that. Maniratnam, no denying, he's a master of emotions. He's one of the better directors that we have, who deals with emotions and shows it on screen pretty well. And in Thug Life, for me, Maniratnam dealt with something called power, right? And that is not something that you get to see in your everyday life that easily. Like what power even means. Like even now, like with everything that's going on around the world, I sometimes find it very hard to understand why the kings, why the rulers, why the dictators are making the decisions that they make. But I felt in the first half of Thug Life, money kind of convinced me. I kind of got it why Shaktivel was so obsessed about the place he was in, and why he finds it very hard to give up his throne, even to Amar. Like he uses Amar as a shield early in the movie, right? When he goes to the jail and all that, he actually tries to do it the second time when he actually when he goes to goes to the jail. Actually, yeah, that was the second time when he uses Amar as a shield, because he kind of knew Nasser, who is his blood related brother, right? And Jojo, they were also eagles who have been wanting this crown as much, but not maybe Amar, because he was an adopted kid, and he felt his instinct was right. But the movie does run in a different direction from there. So these are some stuff that I really liked in the movie, and it kept me invested for a very long time.
In terms of what I would retain, the core story uh, is perfectly fine as it is, right? Ultimately, I think Dart, you covered it quite nicely, right? And using the analogy between a king and a prince. Now, I'll take it in a slightly different way. I'll give you an analogy for what I think is the story that they were going for. And as a story, it's actually quite cool if you think about it, the way I'm describing it now. So I'll use Star Wars as a baseline, as a reference point, rather, I should say. The way I see it is Shaktivel is Emperor Palpatine, Amaran is Vader. Emperor Palpatine, i.e., Shaktivel, raises Vader, i.e., Amaran, gets stabbed in the back by Amaran, and due to what happens through the course of his, you know, journey in the second half, from all the Tibetan stuff, and then whatever happens, in a way, he kind of transitions from being Emperor Palpatine to becoming Master Yoda. In my mind, if you kind of think this through a little carefully, I think that is the arc that they were going for. Kind of also makes sense when you look at the two bookend shots of the film, which is Shaktivel in the field in both cases, and then kind of showing how from one field to another field, how his life has evolved. Right, he started off as a really violent gangster, and then eventually becoming, well, Wild Willy Nayaga, as they call it nowadays, not Win Willy Nayaga. So அந்த விஷயத்துல வந்து I think the core story was actually pretty good. To me, the bigger challenge is the fact that all the interesting ideas that they were going for in the story didn't really see any form of development, which is why the execution fell flat. But we'll come to that when we kind of go to what we would change. So yeah, those are my thoughts on what I would keep in this story. Hari?
Yeah, I think both of you were spot on. I really love that Star Wars analogy, Siege. But yeah, I definitely think they had a bunch of good ideas here. I think like Siege was saying, it's just the development process that maybe made the execution look like absolute shit. But I personally, for me, in the first half, I really like that one line that Kamal says to Estia's like younger version when he promises him that, I'll find your sister for you. I thought that was a really cool plot line that unfortunately they didn't go anywhere with. So I think that was the biggest thing, and I was really intrigued to see where they go with that and kind of how they approach this. And I yeah, like Dart was saying, I like that whole idea of power and what people do to try and get into power or what people do while they're in power. So I like the whole dynamic around that. So yeah, those are the things that I think I would retain. What about you, Pirate?
I like the outline of the film. There are these major moving points. I think what I really like is the characterization to Kamal, even though there were places where I wasn't clear what the intention was, which I'll get to in the other sections. But what I liked is Kamal isn't seen as like Velu Nayakar, for example. He's not somebody who's doing this for like the betterment of other society or whatever. They didn't even attempt to show that in this film. In this film, like they're purely gangsters who just do. I mean, I don't know what they do, but they have like questionable crime and motives that they have, right? So, from looking purely at like Kamal's characterization, I like that he feels powerful. I like that he doesn't. For some reason, he doesn't like his brother, even from an early stage. If you take by what Nasser said, so I liked all those aspects of it. I like that Kamal's jealous of Amar actually like gaining respect and listening. Everybody's listening to him now during that transition that he has to go away. I liked those aspects that I would keep. So usually in all these like mafia films, there's somebody who's the person who's the power center. Like in this case, it's Saktivel, and then there's usually someone in the house who's sort of like a fixer. The fixer is somebody who just goes around doing stuff, and that's what we saw Ahmed do in a couple of different scenes. Like he's trying to actually salvage some stuff. I wish
Actually,
they got
I
into
think
that
the
more.
movie also shows like the Jojo character, like they actually have a scene in the first half where Jojo is kind of skeptical about taking the crown away from Shaktivel. They even show that because they all know, like நீங்க சொன்ன மாதிரி, the heat of of the throne is a little too high for few other people. Like they know how powerful Shaktivel is, and they know he's the one who is capable of. But somewhere deep in, they are like, ஒருவேளை நம்மளுக்கும் இருந்தா நல்லா இருக்குங்கிற அந்த feeling kind of lingers with all of them, right?
And again, we'll get into this where like that those are the areas that I felt had potential. But I think in what they showed, those aspects I definitely liked. I also really liked, and I wish this was executed differently. So this probably falls into that third section. But I liked the idea of the betrayal being somewhere away from where they were. I wish that was executed differently, but I still really liked how they were going to take care of Kamal or handle it, even though how it finally was executed was I was just really not like a big fan of that. I think there's something to Amar wanting to be like his adoptive father or brother or whatever you call it in that relationship. I think there's something unexplored there, but I think just from the execution of what we saw, him wanting to be Saktivel in all aspects was also something that I would keep in the story.
I
So
think,
okay,
right,
oh yeah.
the
Mhm.
elements that all of us have talked about, right, it clearly highlights that they had the right ideas in place. Like, for example, the idea that Saktivel is not a Nayagan, but he's drunk on power. Yes, you see that. It's just that it's not enforced enough. They don't go far enough with it. It just felt like that somehow Money and Kamal were holding something back from making this character even more unlikable than what he is right now. Because ultimately, if they had shown how problematic Saktivel is, his sort of transformation in the second half would have had a greater heft, if that makes sense, right? Because ultimately there is no character journey as such. He's just going through life's experiences, and then that's it. The movie ends because it has to end at a convenient point, right? And to
Mhm.
me, there is no real evolution of Shaktivel as a person throughout this film. If they'd only made him a lot darker in the first half, I think that would have enforced it much better. The same with Amar as well, because Amar, for me, what would have really worked better was, yes, he looks up to Shaktivel and yes, he idolizes, but then he kind of at this point, right, he's like halfway between having his own mind being manipulated by others and idolizing Sakti. He's sort of a muddled character in many ways, and I don't know if Mani and Kamal thought that's character complexity or whatever. It just makes him seem kind of indecisive, and there's no clear thinking put in what he is right now. I guess if he had really made STR or Amar, right, really look up to Kamal to a point where he idolizes him so much that he himself wants all that power and the hedonism that goes with it, right? It would have made Saktivel realize that Amar has become the one thing that he detests after he himself has undergone that transformation in the second half. So basically, Saktivel one day he kind of sees what Amar was, or what Amar is rather, when he had not given up the path of violence or whatever.
Yeah, but
Oh, yeah,
just
actually,
just
why don't we just,
just
yeah.
holding on to that point. Sorry, I kind of little disagree with the movie having to show like Shaktivel Vanda why he is the way he is. I kind of felt with the few scenes that they showed, like using Amar as a shield as a kid, the Trisha character. I felt Maniratnam and Kamal, the first half, the story was strong enough, at least from a narrative point of view, to show, and also like Kamal's brilliant acting was enough for me to convince me to show that he is hungry for power, like whatever Kamal is, So in a first half, actually, that worked out pretty well. But what Amar was, it was pretty lost on me. I was pretty confused about what his intentions were.
Okay, we can talk about what I think we all feel we should remove from the film.
So, what we would have removed, right? Let me kind of go one step further and do like a page one rewrite of the plot, which combines elements of what I would keep and what I would remove. Okay, and it kind of will give you a sense of what I was thinking would have made this film really work. Okay, so my plot would have been something like this. Okay, so Raghurai Saktivel is absolutely unlikable, way more than now, right? He's very very unlikable and just a wild human being all around. But he really adores Amar, so I don't want to see this bit around. He only likes Amar because Amar was a shield to him. He just likes Amar because he likes Amar. There has to be no reason to it because the whole idea is to contrast how he evolves in the second half, right? As a character. Then Amar grows up idolizing him to a point where he literally worships him and he wants everything that Saktivel has. If you kind of position it that way, him kind of wanting Trisha also kind of starts making some sense because he basically wants to be Saktivel Part 2, which in a very vapid way also means he wants to be with Trisha. And so in the pursuit of this power and hedonism that goes with it, he gangs up with the others and kills Saktivel. Saktivel then gets rescued by the monks, and we see him through an extended period of recovery and training. This is just skimmed over like anything, but we literally see him go through this entire phase on how he learned those martial arts. So he not only learns the martial arts, by the way, but also realizes the futility of violence and decides to give up being a gangster and just be with his family. See, ultimately, the whole idea is that martial arts, especially in like a Shaolin temple type of structure, it's not just about, kung fu karate or, beating the crap out of people. There's a strong philosophy and very strongly entrenched in the idea of pacifism. Okay, so he kind of goes to this transformation in the second half, and it is actually shown. It's not skimmed over, where he becomes a pacifist himself because of his time with the monks, whilst also training to be self-reliant. So the whole idea of him kind of transforming into a Master Yoda type figure. He then returns to India, and whilst he has no interest in being a gangster, Amar and the rest consider him as a threat. And Kamal then has to do all the stuff that he does in the second half, all the violent bits, purely in self-defense, not as an act of revenge, because he's kind of given up on that. But then he later comes to the realization that, see, he carries a lot of bad karma. He's done a lot of bad stuff as a gangster, and he comes to the realization that he can't just turn back on his whole life, and he needs to pay the price for it. And in his price, the price of atonement for him is to experience the loss of things that ultimately he gained because he was a gangster, which means losing Trisha, losing Amar, his wife losing his memory, all the same plot beats that you have right now. But for him, it is a process of atonement in many, many ways. And then essentially him coming to this realization that for him, his curse or his path of atonement is to live with the pain of his actions and experiencing the loss of whatever he got because of the fact that he was a thug in some ways. And ultimately, him kind of going into this self actualization state, becoming a farmer and a true Winvili Nagar in many ways, right? And ultimately, he lives with that pain, but he's kind of gone beyond that pain as well. So that's what I thought. That would have been what I would have done as a page one rewrite.
That was brilliant. That is good. I do think like நீங்க எடுத்துட்டு வந்த பாயிண்ட் எல்லாம் like the good thing about this movie, right? நீங்க இப்ப சொன்னது எல்லாமே somewhere it is involved, like படத்துல இருக்குது இது எல்லாமே in some form. It is just, I think,
Ama bro.
ஒரு
Yeah.
ஒரு
That's the frustrating thing, right? That's the frustrating thing. That's the absolute frustrating thing because I can see that they were going for all these elements. It's just that it didn't come together in any meaningful way.
அதான்
That
like
to me is always
I think
very
from the
painful to
writing
watch.
table when they took it to a screenplay or like directorially point of view, I think that is where they kind of it all kind of got lost. Like now I had written a small bit about this, like as a fable, right? இப்போ கமல்ஹாசன் வந்து பல்கேரியா ஃபாரஸ்ட்ல எக்ஸசைஸ் பண்றது, ஓ சாரி தட் வாஸ் another மூவி, பட் but see, it would have worked as if you're reading it as a fable, as a Amar Chitra Katha or something, that would have worked. But when it's 2025 and this is like Kollywood in 2025, like it has to translate in some other way, you know. As an idea, it is good, but on screen, it has to work a little differently. Hari?
Yeah, sure. I think okay, so for the stuff that I didn't like, I think the obvious answer here is saying Trisha's character and whatever that mess was, but I actually thought there was potential in Trisha's character and I understood what they were trying to go for. I think there was potential there, but I think like Siege is saying there's an idea of like trying to still keep that idea there, but kind of reframing the stuff around it to make that make more sense. Like I think the whole dynamic of like STR trying to get back at Kamal by taking captive of Trisha or whatever in a form of manipulation or just I guess a form of extra kind of I saw that as like weird type of possession. I would get rid of all of that. I would say that he has no actual interest towards Trisha because that's just what I just thought that was weird watching that. Instead, I think maybe he could just try and get back at Kamal by just doing something else. That was just weird trying to watch. I don't know. I think that was the biggest parts. I was just cringe on throughout the first half and just trying to just cope with that. Oh my god, this is just really happening in a Mani Ratnam movie. So I think yeah, in this story, I don't think Trisha works at all. I would just get rid of her and then I would actually get rid of that whole. I mean, okay, let's. I understand the whole Rangaraya Saktivel becoming this like unlikable character that you don't like and stuff. But kind of moving away from that, I would actually get rid of Ashok Selvan and the whole
Yeah,
police thinking they can
yeah.
manipulate whole like into getting what they want kind of plot line. I think that's just so Chekkachavandavanam, and I think it's already been done in a bunch of other mafia slash gangster movies anyway. So yeah, I don't think I really know how to approach that police plot because I definitely think in a gangster movie you definitely have to show the perspective of like law enforcement and all, but just framing it as they're manipulating people within the mafia themselves to get what they want. I think that's just an overused plot,
Yeah,
and I
I
would
think
get rid of
Siege,
that as well.
when you're going to be editing this movie out to 90 minutes or lesser, please, I think you can remove Ashok Selvan's character entirely, or even maybe Trisha.
Honestly, I think we can. It's just that there's no other way to bring by that whole Chandra subplot.
Yeah, actually,
But yeah,
you are right about that, Hari. Like in the Padathala Vanda, I think they
um,
deal with too many smaller stories
Yeah,
within the bigger story, and that kind of
yeah,
ruins
yeah.
it. See, என்ன பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் the biggest the biggest story that I will remove is the Ali Faisal character. I mean, my
yeah,
God,
true.
that messed up the
Um,
entire movie for me. Like on the plot point, illama, if the movie was just about Kamal versus about Velu versus
STR.
Amar, I might have been okay, honestly.
Um,
Once that Ali Faisal character comes into the second half and it was a mess. It was a mess. So,
I think
so
there's just
purely,
different perspectives
I'll
of like
totally
revenge. It's
remove
just like
all of
showing
that.
us that this many people want to take revenge. It's like, yeah, we understand by this point.
So even though எனக்கு first halfல வந்து அந்த அலி ஃபைசலோட motivation, like the girl dying and all that, like suicide பண்ணி, and like
ஆமா.
Velu and Amar wanting to kind of give back on them, அதெல்லாம் எனக்கு I felt it was okay in the first half, but them holding it back for so long, and suddenly out of nowhere just this Faisal character comes up and like honestly, like climaxல அவன் எந்திரிச்சு சுடுறது, I was like, dude, no. So
I
yeah,
mean, I was like waiting for that moment where everything like seems calm, and then some random guy comes out of nowhere, and then lo and behold, Ali Faisal comes out of a random window.
yeah, yeah. I think that is what made Thug Life from an good okayish movie to a bad movie for me. Like, dude, spend some more
Yeah,
time in your writing table to make those scenes believable. So yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, Pirate. From my point of view, I think if I have to remove that, is I'll probably remove the entirety of the second half so that I can be okay with just what I saw in the first half. But if I have to remove something for sure, I think it will be the subplot of Ali Faisal entirely. What about you, Pirate?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I have a. It's not a. It's not a monologue or a one-page treatment like Siege did, but what I have is a couple of things. So number one, I feel when I'm thinking about what to remove from the film, it's so hard because, like you guys just said, everything in the writing is contrived to require certain things needed in the film. So, why do they need Ali Faisal character? Because at the end, they need to show that Kamal and Simbur reconciled, but somehow they still have to kill Simbu because Kamal needs to end up in the farm. So, they need Ali Faisal's character to come in, kill Simbu, even though Kamal tries defending him, and Simbu becomes being the shield, and he dies, and then that's why you need that character. Why do you need Trisha's character? Is because you have that sense of, and this is really terrible to say it, but you need an object that Kamal has that gives the idea that when Simbu takes over, it's Kamal's, but now it's Simbu's, and Simbu feels that sort of possession and ownership over that, and that's how Trisha's character is unfortunately framed. But that really is why it's there, and then it's also the act towards the end where when she gets killed, that's the thing that unites both of them in how they feel about it because they both apparently felt really bad about her being killed, right? So it's we can definitely cut out all the aspects of her scenes from it, but I think what it lacks is they didn't add anything else to it, which brings me to my other problem with this film is that the world isn't built big enough beyond these specific things in the sense of where does this family sort of live and conduct business in relation to different power centers that, like for example, a typical mafia family would have. So in lack of all of those things, when Simbu takes over and when Kamal is being taken care of, isn't any sort of setup to given to complicate or understand things. And again, like Siege mentioned, we need Ashok Selvan's cop character because he's necessary in an indirect way to have a contrivance to the person who first actually tried killing Kamal, the cop. He's the son of that cop character, and then therefore you need to kind of show that they're the ones who took on Chandra, just like how Kamal took on Simbu. So you need them for that. So it's like anything that we want to try and touch to remove basically affects some of these contrived pieces. So it's not like specifically easy to do it, but like Siege said, like the treatment of how he kind of explained what are some of the things that he would change and move around. I think like for me, if I had to do something like that, going to Dart's point, I would also remove basically everything from the second half, and even up to the specific point of where exactly like they try to take care of Kamal. Like given that this film is about how like there's betrayals and it's like a family level betrayal to some extent. I would really like try to just go back and focus on are we getting that through line throughout. So I guess one of the aspects I thought about after watching this film was something like Breaking Bad, for example. So we sort of established Kamal's character, as Seed said, as a completely like wild guy. So basically, we actually even show a scene of how he actually betrayed Sadanan, because there are references in the movie of how Sadanan says he's the one who made Saktivel um, be where he is today. So there is definitely some aspect of betrayal there already, and which is kind of hypocritical of Kamal's character later on, where he's taken on this power head, and now he's surrounded by people just like him uh, throughout this film, right? The other aspects that I think I would do are I would kind of try to grow Ashok Selvan's character more, and I would try to essentially make it to a point where the second half of the film is more Kamal actually being like so wild that he would actually become an informer to some extent, where he would basically figure out a way to get back. I think I would prefer that over all the martial arts, Tibetan, Yakuza stuff that happened and all the killing that happens, because honestly, the part I was confused by was we already kind of, and Dot, you said this in the beginning, is we already kind of established that Kamal's character isn't like someone who's noble or anything like that, right? So when he's killing all these other people in the second half and they have this triumphant music playing, that basically like makes no sense, because they're not that different from Kamal in any degree or angle. It's not like going to Tibet has basically changed his whole philosophy on anything. He's coming back and still like killing all these people and stuff. So for me, if I were to tweak the second half, it would more be still mafia centric, so we wouldn't like go into this zone of him performing martial arts, killing all these people, but it would be very much like an intense, he has now become sort of an informer, and Kamal actually has to protect the family that he still has. And I would probably also make it so that Trisha actually backstabs Kamal. Like if we're going to the extent where we're kind of giving Trisha this character, I would actually double down on her being actually a negative character. And so Kamal actually in the second half has to be somebody who takes out this entire family out of spite, but he still also has to protect the family that he still has from these people. And it would be sort of like an intense like cat and mouse game of seeing how Kamal's able to survive that. And that I feel would make things a little bit more like realistic for me and not be out there. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, both of you hit the nail on its head with him going to a monastery where the teachings of a monastery is not to come back and get involved in a Shankar style of movie and go and kill everyone. It's basically like I Padamartana, the basic. He goes and comes
Mm-hmm.
back and he's killing one person after the another. எனக்கு ஷூரா தெரியல would he have been okay, like I think Siege அவரோட monologue சொல்றப்போ he touched on this. Let's say Simbu, Joju and Nasser are okay with Kamal coming back if he's just gonna go away from the throne and just, but for what we know of Kamal, of how he has been established in the first half, he's just hungry for power lah. So I kind of feel it is a little bit lost on that. So எனக்கு தெரியல, லைக் அவர் திருப்பி ஒரு புத்தரா வந்திருந்தாலும் இவங்க மூணு பேர் அவனை தனியா
Independent
விட்டுருப்பாங்களாங்கிறது
of
கொஞ்சம் டவுட் தான்.
independent of whether we look at the sort of page and reader that I did or Pirate did, right? I think the key element here is that independent of what Kamal is in the second half, he's still perceived as a threat by the others.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the best case scenario, right? Let's say he becomes all zen. அது வந்து கமலுக்கு தெரியும், அமருக்கு தெரியாதுல்ல. They just view him as a person that they killed or tried to kill and he's now back. So the logical conclusion is that going by his history, he's going to come after them and start killing them.
நீங்க
Or
சொன்ன
he
மாதிரி
is,
கர்மா.
plotting something big. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a different matter. It could very well be that, depending on which kind of angle you want to take, Kamal would actually actively pursue that, or he wants to stay away from it, but he keeps getting dragged back into this conflict, right? And I think that is the key bit. So the idea that Amar and Nasser and all these characters, right, would somehow let Kamal be, even if he did absolutely nothing in the second half, I think that kind of corrects itself if they had spent more effort in establishing how problematic or how vile a character Shaktivel is in the first half. அந்த எலிமெண்ட் தான் வந்து இல்ல யூ கைண்ட் ஆஃப் மிஸ் பிகாஸ் the way the film deals with Saktiveer as a character right now, he's sort of being positioned as a gray character in some ways. Like, yeah, he does
Mhm.
violent stuff, and yes, he has questionable things in his life and whatnot. But at the same time, he seems to be like a family person. He seems to be very fond of his wife. He wants to give up all of this and become a farmer, which is, I think, there just to tie back to the ending, to be fair, in the current cut. ஸோ ஒரு மாதிரியான ஒரு கிரே கேரக்டர் பண்ணிட்டு இல்லை யூ டோன்ட் ரியலி நோ வாட் இஸ் சக்திவேல் அஸ் வாட் இஸ் இன் ஸோ அந்த ஆர்க் எவல்யூஷனே கிடைக்க மாட்டேன்றது யூ கான் ஜஸ்ட் சிம்பிளி கோ ஃப்ரம் அ பர்சன் வாஸ் ambiguous and have an arc which still leaves him ambiguous at the end and then suddenly say, oh, now he's a Vinveli Nayagan. That makes no sense to me.
See,
And the
first of
journey எனக்கு தெரியல அதுல.
they show often like சக்திவேல் வந்து சந்தேகப்பட்டுட்டே இருப்பான் ஓவர் அமர். I really liked all that because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's so possessive of his throne that
Yeah.
பக்கத்துல
Yeah,
யார்
yeah,
வந்தாலும் he starts feeling the heat, right? So அதெல்லாம்
yeah.
it was pretty good honestly, but like you
Yeah, yeah,
said,
yeah.
that kind of does it disappear or does it not disappearங்கிறதே ஸ்கிரீன்ல டிரான்ஸ்லேட் ஆகல அதுக்கப்புறம்.
ஆமா. And I think that the whole sort of what I don't know if there's a hidden hard disk somewhere or whatever which gets discovered at some point, but I have a very bad feeling along with the Muthumalai video song which I believe has released today. There is probably an extended portion of stuff where Kamal is in that temple or monastery or whatever, which for some reason got cut out. Yeah, I find it very, very hard to believe that someone like Mani would literally, just just wave it with his hand and say, oh, நான் 2 வருஷம் அங்கே இருந்தேன் அங்கே நான் எனக்கு வந்து மார்ஷல் ஆர்ட்ஸ் கற்றுக் கொடுத்தாங்க. And that is the foundation on which he's going to build his entire revenge in the second half. I cannot believe that Mani and Kamal signed off on this. That just seems baffling.
I think Shaktivel almost
In,
mentioned
that was
second
set up
half
in the
that
most laziest way as well through dialogue. I didn't
Exactly.
like how, yeah,
Which is
like
why
it's one of
I'm
the most
saying,
laziest ways.
which is why I'm telling you, there is a hidden hard disk somewhere which will be discovered and we'll get an
There
extended
has
cut.
to be.
so all this
I
kind
just,
of ties up like ஒரே ஒரு dialogue வந்து Shaktivel in second half சொல்லுவாரு. He will be like, I'm coming back only because of the Abhinami character. He says he's coming back for love. I think that is the only place they at least give us an கொஞ்சம் objective like what kept him alive all these days and why he's coming back.
I'm glad, like Siege, you mentioned you'd want to see the monastery scenes. I'm happy I don't see it because seeing how everything else was laid out, I feel like the reason they probably cut it out is because it's too jarring and sort of out of place
Yeah.
from the tone of the rest of the film. So I think they wanted to keep it back to they wanted to get as quickly back to the action, like gangster style stuff that they were building before. Like, I think that's why everything feels like it just has to be brought back immediately.
Yeah, like நீங்க
Yeah.
சொல்ற மாதிரி like if the monastery scene was kind of expanded on, like this movie is, if it would have been an amazing movie, it was just about Amar versus Shaktivel. I think we all agree on that la. uh, and
yeah,
and as
completely.
much as Shaktivel பத்தி இவ்வளவு பேசுறப்போ, I think the movie, like for me honestly, if I was like changing something about the writing, எனக்கு என்னன்னா, I would have spent more time on what Amar is going through. Like Amar, when he's losing his sister, and he kind of agrees and believes that Vale killed his dad, right? And from there, how does he transition into somebody who is believing Vale is his godfather, kind of like what is happening there? Yeah? Like show that on screen, right? The first time they're showing Simbu on screen, he's having a smiling face. Pinadi Omar apart, he has dimples on his cheeks. Like, dude, you have been traumatized with all this, and this is what is coming to us. So maybe Manitam is trying to tell us he's beyond all that, but I don't think that is true. And this is the first point. Second one, the again, like after, okay, let's say we accept that Amar has forgiven Vale and he sees him as his godfather. He goes against him just because Nasir comes and tells him that, like your dad like Shaktivel was the one who killed your dad and all that. See, you can't just flip a page just like that. Like Amar is supposed to be a crown prince. Like he's supposed to be a little more wiser than that, right? Like சும்மா ஒருத்தவங்க சொல்றாங்கிறதுக்காக you can't just flip a page and plot a revenge and kill somebody who has been your godfather all this time. Like these 2 points, like அமரோட சேஞ்ச் ஆஃப் மைண்ட் வந்து இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் படத்துல ப்ராப்பரா பண்ணிருக்கலாம் is what I felt.
Yeah, and I guess just a couple of thoughts there. Number one, I feel like this idea that like all of your underlings in like a mafia family that you have would always keep wanting to vie for power and try to take it away from you. I feel like that's been like shown a lot in like in Tamil films and also like in just Indian films. But I think generally the idea is that in any complicated like organization like this, hierarchy is so important, and everyone who is part of that sort of hierarchy understands like how important that structure is. Because if anyone just under the that structure says, you know what, I'm no longer going to like obey your commands, or I deserve this power, so I'm just going to go after it, is super unrealistic, except when the person who's seen as the head keeps making like terrible mistakes and he keeps putting the entire organization in some sort of trouble or mess. And so that's when there's usually some sort of consensus that builds for everyone to take out like such a powerhead or somebody like that. And so to that point, it's already sort of established early on in the film, even before Amar is actually adopted by Saktivel, that you can see that Nasser's actually the character who actually gets up and shakes hands with Sadanand. So that sort of almost gives like an equal role or responsibility in this organization, where Kamal's not able to come out straight away and sort of handle this. Even I feel like the way this meeting is also staged, Kamal has no interest in reconciliation with Sadanand, yet the meeting is taking place there. So that to me already says he's listening to whatever Nasser's character. I mean, it has to be Nasser's character that brought all of them to that place, right? Because there's some sort of reconciliation that's happening there. So already it feels a little bit like what the movie is telling us early on, is that even though Kamal's sort of this powerhead, he's still to some extent his ear is still something that Nasser's character is able to talk to and get to. So couple that with like suddenly several years later, someone like Amar who's outside of this organization can just suddenly get in, and he can now become the next person because he's now sort of seen as the heir, is itself a little bit unrealistic realistically.
Uh, Pi-
So
Pirate, I kind of
yeah.
touched upon this earlier in the context. Like first scene, like how Velu uses Amar as a shield to save his life. I feel when he goes to jail, he does that because he doesn't feel threatened about Amar. He doesn't feel Amar wants the throne. So Analda, he's like okay putting Amar because he felt when he comes back from jail, he will give it back. But he doesn't feel that way with Nasser or Jojo because he knows they want that power as much as he does. So I think that's where they were going with that, or at least that's how
Yeah, but
Sakti will.
I'm saying even before we get to that scene, like that's what I'm actually saying. I'm saying even before we get to that scene, like just the way the power center is set up in this family is itself not very clear that Kamal holds all the power. Like Nasser has to some extent some influence over how they conduct meetings, who they agree to with deals, how all these things sort of happen, right? So I think we're jumping to the point where Kamal actually goes to jail and he leaves like Amar behind as a shield. That's fine. But my point is like if they were going to promote somebody like that, there would be way more like resentment and open discussion. And like what I'm saying is Kamal's character, if he feels that way about Jojo, George, and Nasser, he would first of all never have agreed to even get off the plane in that flight when Amar isn't even around in Nepal. So the just the fact that he's like trusting these guys and going to that location
Oh,
then doesn't stay
that was a
consistent with that
total
earlier
mess.
point of the film.
That was a total mess. I
Yeah.
still don't know why he went there and all that. That was a total mess.
Yeah, the writing consistency is what, and also like if we're saying Kamal trusts Simbu's character so much, then the sudden creep and doubt about why he's not there when the shootout happened, like that's what I mean by the writing consistency of it. It's, I think all of this stems from the fact that like not everybody in this organization knows what their place is. Basically everyone's acting like Kamal's weak, and therefore we have to take him on. But that's not like necessarily how it's there, because he's not doing anything detrimental to them. It seems like they're doing pretty well off. There isn't any sort of struggle that is shown with this organization. In fact, Kamal is the one who actively decides to go to jail, because he's the one suddenly out. Not even Nasser. Kamal's the one who decides he's going to kill the guy, and even he explains to Nasser like, I can go to jail, like you can't, for some reason I don't know. So it's like, and why would somebody who's like the head of the organization do that and decide to do that? And then there is no sort of like process that happens when he's in jail, because if he's this well-known criminal, wouldn't they pile all the cases on him, and wouldn't he stay in the jail for way longer? So like all these like contrived things in the film, and then he's just able to come out. These are the facts that I'm saying. Like, the fact that the world isn't built well makes all these issues more obvious, and I think we're ignoring it because we are focused on the core of the film is Amar and Saktivel's character and what those two like do to each other. But I think the aspects that aren't fleshed out, or that we don't see on screen, contribute to a lot of the issues we see with how the film plays out.
I think we
But because if they had all of those, I think we wouldn't need all the other characters like Ali Faisal, Trisha, even Ashok Selvan's character to some extent. It would be framed in a very different way, is what I'm saying.
they had all these loose threads, but ஒரு டைட்டான நாட் இல்லை இந்த படத்துல. I think that is what.
All right. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Do let us know in the comments below what you think about Thug Life. What do you think are some things that worked well in the movie? What are the things that you would probably remove from the film? And what if given an opportunity, would you consider rewriting to make it better? Also, let us know what you think about this new series Under the Lens, and what other films you would like us to cover. One of the things that we are actually interested in covering is Indian 2. Again, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the r/Kollywood podcast. We'll catch you in the next one.
Bye guys.
Peace out.
Thank you guys. #comeback Indian.
வெளிநாயகா